Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us this morning. I know it's a crazy time of the year, and we all have a bit of a shortened December with the late holiday, so we appreciate you joining us. We're really excited to get to today's session, so we'll go ahead and get started. A special thanks to the anchor investors of Max. These are really the organizations that keep things moving and are so integral in making sure all of our programming happens. So if you work with these organizations, please make sure to give them a big thank you for their support of advancing workforce development in Metro Atlanta. I'm Daniela Perry. I serve as the executive director for the Georgia Chamber Foundation and serve on the Max Executive Committee along with Tim. And really excited to have a fun session talking about everything we could expect in the legislative session. And again, it's a lot of crystal balling. We wish we had a bit more of a clearer picture. So we'll give you all the insights that we know of, and there will always be a few surprises. But really excited to have Tim Cairl, Senior Director for Talent Development and Public Policy with the Metro Atlanta Chamber, who also serves as the treasurer for Max, and then Cosby Johnson, Director of Government Affairs for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. So really excited to have both of you, Tim and Cosby, and appreciate y'all being with us. I would love for y'all just to kind of start by sharing a little bit about yourself and kind of what's within your purview and your role. So Cosby, we'll start with you.
Yeah, number one, Daniela, Joy, thank you guys for bringing this group together. Thanks for everyone who's on and the work that you all do. I will be quick because I know Tim is the real expert. And so I want to leave all the room to get that kind of in the weeds knowledge that he has. My name's Cosby Johnson. As Daniela said, I'm in the Government Affairs Department for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, covering the spaces of business and industry, workforce and talent, as well as healthcare. And so those are my three areas of kind of purview. But anybody who is on a lobbying team knows that at any point in time, you could be called to be a tax specialist or anything else. So we've all had to do that, and just really proud of the team we've put together. Also, a big congratulations to Daniela and her promotion inside of our organization. And so really excited about that.
Thank you, Cosby. And Cosby also has a dual role in serving as mayor of the city of Brunswick. So please, everyone, make a couple extra trips down to Brunswick and spend all of your tax dollars there. That's my other plug for you. And then Tim, please share a little bit about kind of what's in the purview of your role.
Thanks, Daniela. And hey, Cosby, good to see you again. Tim Cairl, I'm Senior Director for Talent at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. I lead our talent and education/workforce policy and programs. So we do some things internally on the program side with our investor companies, and then, of course, work with the folks on this call as well as many other down at the Capitol to advance education and workforce policy initiatives.
Thanks so much, Tim. And we certainly enjoyed the partnership we have with the Metro Atlanta Chamber, really to think about everything that we can do to advance workforce development and ensure we have a strong business climate, because we know that talent is critical for communities and for businesses. So just always grateful to work closely with y'all. We'll kind of just get started first with kind of what are your organization's legislative priorities related to K-12 and workforce? And Cosby, we'll again start with you.
Yeah, number one, I think we were happy to see last year us do some work around the high demand career initiative list, and we were happy to see that get done. But I think there is a additional step that we can do to ensure that that list is regionalized in a smart way, where people have access from different parts of the state, and that can plug into that. The other thing that I think we will be focused on in that space is licensure reciprocity. Licensure reciprocity is something the Georgia Chamber of Commerce has worked on since Daniela's father was in the House, and so licensure reciprocity is something we worked on last year with Representative Bethany Ballard, but it's something that we also want to work on or are thinking about working on this year in the space of school psychologists and ensuring that children have access to the kind of help that they need inside of the schoolhouse. The other thing that we believe the legislature will take a look at is school safety. School safety is something that they have kind of worked on a little bit in the background over the years. They've added additional funds to localities and for local school systems, but also individual schools to use those dollars to expand their security measures. But what we've seen in Georgia this year, what we believe is that legislators, both new and old, who will be coming in will probably have something to say about additional school security in that space.
Thanks, Cosby. And Tim, would love to hear from y'all's perspective too. What are the big things that y'all have been planning to track?
Yeah, so always got a number of things. For the education and workforce side, of course, childcare is always a high priority for us. And I know we'll talk more about that a little later, but a lot of things happening on that front. Um, Also, expanding the career and technical opportunities for students in K-12. There's a number of things there. Our particular interest has been around computer science and making sure that that expansion and teacher training throughout the state is done with really high fidelity and that our students all have access to those programs that really ensure their future career success, no matter what industry or what field they're going into. And then, of course, just any post-secondary entry and completion. I got used to saying college for so long, but it's really making sure that students have full access to all of those post-secondary options, both in high school and out of high school, that set them up for good career success. And then just minor things around, from the workforce side, supporting everything from worker training to, let's see, the folks on this call would call it incumbent worker training, and the systems that we put in place around that on the workforce side, as well as a whole host of other wide business support opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, I am so glad that you mentioned childcare because there were a number of study committees that met throughout the summer and the fall that everyone was tracking. I know Brian Strickland's childcare study committee just met yesterday to kind of release recommendations, but Tim, would love to kind of for you to share some of those highlights from the study committees that you've been watching, any big takeaways that we can kind of think that could come out of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Daniela. Kudos to Senator Strickland for really, kind of, I don't think if you'd asked any of us last year whether that was on the radar, I don't think we would have picked it. But he has really led that with great fidelity and taken a lot of input, not just from those of us on the advocacy side, but also from the child care center and provider side, and sort of hearing all sides. They made several trips to different spots around the state to take in that feedback. And it looks like they come up with some really interesting proposals, particularly around the tax credit side. There's some expansion opportunities there, and these are just proposals that will come in the state Senate, we expect, for this particular session. But they've got some things on the child care tax deduction for parents. But uh, for me, the really interesting part, and this is something we haven't seen for a while, which is the expansion of the tax credit for employer-sponsored childcare. And I would expect there will be a lot of push and discussion around making that applicable for small and medium-sized businesses, which is something that we've talked about for a number of years, but haven't really put something heavy into place. So I'm sure everybody on this call knows if you're a small employer and you are trying to offer any type of childcare for your employees, it is incredibly challenging and very expensive. So having these things like tax credits and the ability to pool resources and to band together to fix some of these childcare gap issues is a huge need, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses. But then just the overall business tax credit expansion is going to benefit everybody on the field. And certainly the childcare providers have to be slightly excited about this as well, because that means that they would have additional opportunities both from the individual and family tax credit side and from the business side. It just sort of changes the landscape a little bit for childcare and maybe opens up some expansion opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, especially as we've seen kind of the decrease in federal funds from a lot of the COVID dollars going away. I know we've heard from some, childcare providers across the state that are like, we're really just having to make some tough choices about, do we raise tuition for our families, or, do our employees have lowered, you know, compensation. And obviously neither are something that's ideal for your employees or for your families. And so I think everyone's been in a extremely challenging spot. So obviously very hopeful. And I think, Tim, to your point, those small and medium-sized businesses need resources just like our large employers. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to see some things, and especially challenging in rural communities.
Yep.
Obviously, there's huge needs in Atlanta and the metro Atlanta area too, but I would say it's also a really different and challenging picture in rural communities as well.
Yeah.
Um, but Cosby, any of the other study committees too that you've been watching, either related to workforce or some of the other issues that kind of could impact this committee? I know we've been focused on a lot of things, but would love kind of your perspective on what's top of mind after study committee activity this summer and fall.
Well, number one, just tapping into what Tim was saying, I think in the childcare space, there's an interesting thing that was talked about, whether it was the individual ones that we talked to or the ones that had conversations in the study committee about attracting workers, that they have space for kids to be a part of their programs, but to ensure that those state standards are still met, they have to have a certain number of employees, and it's really hard to attract those workers. So worker pay is something that I think the industry really has to work on and tackle, and they have to tackle that with the help of obviously state dollars. The other one for us as the Georgia Chamber, we're always focused on tort reform, and I don't think I could get off of this phone without talking about tort reform, or Chris would fire me. So to the tune of without saying we're kind of beating a dead horse or beating the same drum, tort reform is something that's incredibly important to us. We saw the governor have 3 meetings throughout the state focused on 3 different areas, and we're hoping this year that we see some movement in the area of tort reform. The things that are obviously important to us there are a range of things, whether it is anchoring, which is where anybody can find themselves in a litigious situation, and a lawyer can come in and say, we just think this person deserves $50 million, and that somehow sets in the jury's heads. So that's incredibly important to get rid of that. Premises liability is something we've also been working on. We had several conversations around the state about that, but also med mal is something that it seems like the governor is also focused on. So coming out of that study committee is something that we are going to continue to be working on and wrap our hands around as it continues to move.
I think that's great. And it is something that I think that'll continue to be a big priority for the business community. There's been some features too in the AJC about it. So whether it's a top priority for your organization, it certainly is going to impact the legislative session. And we're certainly very hopeful that a lot of businesses will get some predictability and really a level of the playing field so that we can focus on a lot of the other issues that are impacting the business community as well as employers.
And Danielle, if I could, there was a study committee last year that I'm not sure how many people tracked. I know we were tracking, dealing with the financial sustainability and viability of areas around HBCUs. There are a lot of historically black colleges and universities that are really in gray areas when it comes to the spaces that they are located inside of their cities. Senator Halpern, or Vice Chairwoman Halpern, really spearheaded that, got the lieutenant governor involved, and did drop a piece of legislation that we were supportive of. Unfortunately, that piece of legislation did not get across the finish line. But I know Senator Halpern has done a lot of work in the off season, and I'm not sure that we will see another piece of legislation. And that piece of legislation was to really bring the local HBCU together with the local community to figure out how they could build kind of innovation or enterprise zones around those HBCUs. So students who were coming out of those historically Black colleges and universities would have really an ecosystem to move into and to grow into their careers. While, again, that bill didn't pass, we are hoping to see some piece of policy, whether it's in rules and regs or whether it's an actual bill, begin to be worked on by all parties. So happy to continue to work away at that.
And Cosby, I think that's a great point, especially as we're thinking about the huge impact that our HBCUs do have, not only for the students that attend them, but to your point, for the communities they're located in. And we know, the strong network that we have here in the state, which is incredibly exciting, not only in Metro Atlanta with the AUC, but we've got Fort Valley State, Savannah State, and a lot of other great ones. So excited about that too. And we'll certainly keep y'all posted. Um, so kind of from a process standpoint, it's a new biennium. So any bill that was last year kind of introduced has officially died. And then it has to get reintroduced this year for it to move forward. So Cosby, to your point, that bill about, Senator Halpern, she's kind of having to start from scratch, or any other legislator that had a bill that may have been stuck in committee and hadn't moved forward, you kind of have to start all over again. What are y'all thinking about in terms of kind of process of what this new biennium looks like? We've certainly had some leadership changes for both in the, on the Democratic side in the Senate and the House with new leadership. But kind of, can y'all talk through some of that, I guess inside baseball about what the process is going to look like, what we should expect from some of those changes too? And Tim, we'll turn it over to you first.
Yeah, there's probably a couple of interesting twists on that, right? So there's definitely things we expect to come back that didn't quite get addressed fully in the last 2-year session. So you've got everything from that sort of college success and getting students to and through post-secondary, particularly as it relates to our high demand careers and certifications that they're after. Um, we had some initial success a few years ago in getting that program in place, and it's really about those last mile finance problems that students hit. Um, was on the books, sort of got some guardrails around it about how it would work from Georgia Student Finance Commission, and then some initial funding, but it hasn't expanded yet or had some adjustments to make it work a little more efficiently or work better, I should say, for students. So I know Chairman Chuck Martin on the House side has been kind of carrying that to get it through. So we'll be really interested to see like what form that takes this year, if it's the same proposal or if it's different, and if there's funding attached. So that's kind of one example. One non-education one that I think we talked about at the wrap-up from last session was around truck weights and infrastructure regulation and spending, which tends to take a lot of the oxygen out of the room because it's a very I wouldn't say contentious. It's a very debated issue, heavily debated issue amongst the legislature. So I'll be curious if that comes back and what form that takes, and just kind of those other things that that will crowd over that system. And I always like to issue a warning when we do these, which is people will read or hear things on the radio about something that sounds huge that's hitting, but in reality, you just kind of have to watch and what is actually moving and what is actually taking up legislators' time is always fascinating to me. There are a lot of bills that get dropped. There's well over 1,000 each year that go into each side. A majority of those don't see the light of day or don't pass. So anybody can drop a bill. So don't be shocked if you read something you're like, oh my gosh, this is great, or oh my gosh, this is horrible. Yeah, wait and see like where does that actually go? Does the bill get a hearing? Does it actually like pass a committee? It's sort of like all of those check marks that a bill has to go through to make it live. And so I always like to put that little warning, don't believe everything you hear or everything you read. Make sure it's actually something that's legitimately moving. So we try to focus on the things that we think actually have some merit, and we'll move on it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. A lot of folks do introduce things kind of from a values signaling perspective, but to your point, it's just because one person thinks it's a great idea does not mean the full Georgia General Assembly and the governor also think it's a good idea. So that's some good word for the wise to stay calm and certainly obviously reach out to, your lobbying friends about what's actually moving on. But Cosby, what, do you think we can kind of expect from some of these, again, new process changes, what to expect, what's going to be different and what, will continue to be consistent?
Well, I think, starting off for the real inside baseball people, we're blessed to have Lieutenant Governor Jones and Speaker Burns returning because they have been very open and transparent with the schedule. If people remember back in the day, you didn't know when your last day of session would be. You didn't know if it would be one day during this week, 5 days next week. So they've been pretty transparent about the schedule, and so we are just kind of blessed to have both of them kind of leading both of our houses. With that, just a couple of quick numbers for you so you guys understand. I'm sure everyone heard kind of that it was a quite contentious election, not only on the federal level, but also internal because it was the first time we used the new maps. And so a lot of interest around, what seats were held, what seats weren't, what the new seats do. And following the election, we have a breakdown inside of the Senate of 33 Republicans, 23 Democrats. In the House, it's 100 Republicans with 80 Dems in the state House. And so what we were happy to see is that a lot of our friends who we work with on several issues who kind of assumed they were in some trouble, which were kind of Metro Atlanta Republicans, seemed to hold their seat, and we are glad to see a lot of the people that we worked with coming back to continue some of the good work that they're doing. However, with those people coming back, there are also 53 newly elected individuals who Tim and I and other teams have to get up to speed on the issues of the day. Inside of that, Daniela, you correctly stated that we do have new leadership slates in on the Democratic side of the House, which for us thinks that we believe that a lot of negotiations around a lot of major issues will start to move as you have stronger leadership in those places. Dr. James Beverly was replaced by Carolyn Hughley, which is a long time House member and a person who has a lot of wisdom and has been in the leadership structure for a long time. And Gloria Butler was replaced by Harold Jones, who's a lawyer from the Augusta area, who is really common sense, and we hope to be able to work with him as well. The other issues that we believe kind of are out there, one, I want to start with clearly a thing that all of us will see. We are moving into kind of the statewide election season in 26. So you may see, some crazy social bills kind of hit out there. There's something that we will obviously pay attention to and ensure that it doesn't affect our state standing in the world of not only business, but education and workforce and talent development as well. So we will definitely keep an eye on that. The other spaces that kind of we will begin to look at is one, housing. We know that is a conversation that we've been having for a very long time. Last session, GMA as well as the Georgia Chamber, who, if you know this work, we don't always work together, but GMA and the Georgia Chamber kind of put forward some carrot and stick measures that hopefully would spur local communities to really get involved in solving this housing crisis. Unfortunately, we didn't see those bills pass, although one of the measures kind of got to the end, but we didn't see it fully past the finish line. But it's something that we know that we have to work on, especially in the space of zoning and ensuring that local communities are helping us solve that issue. The other big issue that I think intersects with not only business but also the workforce and talent realm is the growth of AI. I don't want to say exactly what our legislation will be. Not our legislation, what legislation we will see come out of the of either the Senate or the House. But what we do know is several states, such as Texas, such as California, and so there are several states around the nation that are beginning to implement their own AI kind of technology rules and regs. Their reasoning is because they realize that the federal government is kind of moving too slow in that space, and they don't want to be caught in the same space that they were in around data privacy. However, a patchwork of 50 different things and doesn't seem the best way to tackle the issue. So we will be keeping our eye on anything growing out of the AI regulatory space. And the other is something that we always watch, which is both the House and the Senate has the ability to evaluate tax incentives each year. That is something that is important to every single one of our members. And so we have to ensure that not only the ones that they pick, that they're smart ones that need to be evaluated, but also have a basis of evaluating those tax credits to ensure that we're showing not only the primary purpose, but also the secondary and tertiary effects of those tax credits.
Yeah, and Cosby, it's a great point because some of those evaluations have come out in the last couple of weeks of the credits that were evaluated. So all of that's kind of available, and certainly feel free to reach out to us and we can make sure y'all see those reports. But it's always something that we're mindful of because you never know what we'll expect. And Cosby, I'm so glad you started kind of talking about some of those things. Tim, I'd love your thoughts too on maybe some of those issues that, you know, aren't totally top of mind for us, but could kind of pop up as either, like a third rail or end up becoming those big areas, kind of any signals from, what you've heard from leadership or other members about what their priorities are, and maybe what maybe some of those surprises for us this year.
Yeah, so two that I neglected to mention before that I don't wouldn't say are surprises, but I think people are going to be waiting on to see what form it takes, particularly from the leadership side. One is around occupational licensing and seeing what that legislation looks like for this round. There's been a lot of push to put some transparency or sunshine around how all of our different occupational licenses work and what the actual requirements and qualifications for those are. So it's a good thing. It's a good modernization thing that I'm glad the legislature is taking up. So it'll be interesting to see what that takes. The other one is what workforce and or education bills the governor is sponsoring. Those tend to have a lot of weight and tend to move quite quickly. I have a sense we'll know about those in the first couple of weeks of the legislature. So those are the two kind of the positive ones that I'd be look out for. Um, Similar to what Cosby said, revision around any tax credits or economic incentives is something that is always in play. Some years louder more than others. So what that looks like, the tort reform that the governor will be sponsoring, and how what that looks like and how the legislature is working with it and receives it. I expect there will be something. This may be on the budget side around hurricane relief and disaster relief. There might be some initiatives there. I would expect that it's probably going to be more on the budget discussion and what we're funding for those types of activities. I mentioned truck weights earlier. One that's kind of fresh from this morning is around transgender athletes. It's more of on the social and healthcare side, but there will be legislation we're expecting from that. That study committee wrapped up this morning and adopted the report. I think there will be a lot of high school versus college sports discussions in that one. I'm sure our high school sports association will be involved in that, as well as our university system and other sports entities. So that will probably take up a lot of headline space. Um, and then just with the surplus that Georgia is sitting on and how the governor is wishing to tackle that, be curious to see if there's a tax refund, um, even if it's one time, for how those funds could be distributed. It seems to be where the priority for uh, our governor and his staff are for now. So there's that. And then just like Cosby said, the 2026 preparation for those folks who are eyeing those open statewide seats, and then thinking about where does that fit within leadership within both the House and Senate. There will be a lot of preempting long before 2026 to get out in front and maybe get some free earned media and what they're talking about and what they're pushing, as well as those that are legitimately have heartfelt issues that they want to push. You use like the child care tax credit as an example of like something that's a little more near and dear, not necessarily a political push. So that's pretty much it from like the big stuff we expect. I'll be curious on the education side what the school safety measures look like. We've had school safety bills before that were much more around capital or property safety. So I'll be interested if there's more to it than that this time, or if it's just more kind of doubling down on those initial or earlier efforts.
Yeah, to to what Tim said, you hit the nail on the head. I think one of the spaces that will be interesting is in the space of school safety. Again, do you double down on giving individual localities dollars to hire additional officers, put extra things in the school, or do you kind of, look at it and maybe we want to attack some of those root causes before it kind of gets to the actual footprint? And so that'll be something that I think will be um, hotly debated. I think both sides will obviously be in favor of protecting our children, ensuring our schools are safe and a safe place for not only children, but for teachers as well. How we get there is something that I do think will be a debate through session. The other one that I just wanted to throw out there because I feel Madison somewhere in the back of my head, but transportation dollars will be something that is, again, a conversation. I agree with Tim. It'll probably be more of a budget conversation, but right now we're dealing with a $16.5 billion surplus. And I think there's a lot of people eyeing those dollars as to what spaces those could go into. Transportation is definitely one that seems to always be at the table. I do believe there will be some kind of bill around access to healthcare. And I think we'll see that probably this year or very early next year. But the only piece of advice, not necessarily around that, but I have for anybody on the phone that have pieces of legislation that they are interested in, policies that they are interested in, is really get it done this year. Get to work on that this year. It'll be important to get it done this year. The reason being is, again, some inside baseball from everything that we are hearing from everyone that we talk to. When it turns to 26, there will almost be a depletion of talent, especially on the Senate side. There are a lot of people in leadership on the Senate side that are eyeing other offices. The way that their internal kind of agreements work out is or their caucus agreements is if they are running for a higher office, then they would have to step out of their caucus position. So we could have a possibility where we lose a lot of institutional wisdom, a lot of institutional understanding of the issues that we are working on, because those individuals will be focused on 26. So 25 is really a really good year to ensure that we get things going and moving, and at least to a place where in 26 we're just kind of finishing the job. So
I think that's great insights, Cosby and Tim, both about what to expect. And, I think again, there's always surprises, so this is our best crystal ball at this point. So I know there'll be some things that surprise us too, but certainly some of those big priorities too around, lawsuit abuse, tort reform, as well as transportation for us. The state needs $84 billion by 2050 just for freight and logistics. That's not potholes or anything like that. So Tim, to your point about truck weights, how does this all get figured out? We've got some big issues that we'll kind of see where leadership and general members land. I want to be mindful too of everything else that please, if you've got questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. But Cosby and Tim, I know you've both mentioned the High Demand Career Initiative that Governor Kemp supported, and I know kind of both of our organizations, along with a number of others, have been involved with the High Demand Career List. But any kind of top of mind takeaways, just as we expect the list to get rolled out in the first of next year, about what people should expect. Tim, I'll turn it over to you first.
Yeah, I think, uh, for lack of a better term, anytime you have um, a new way of doing things that has to be implemented across the state. Georgia's a really large state. So I personally always take these things kind of in draft form, I would say, for the first iteration. So whether that's like a new, scholarship program, whether it's, revamping how we're doing high demand career initiative, any of those, like there are always tweaks that have to happen once an implementation gets started, things that were maybe not anticipated right at the beginning. So I'm really curious to see how the implementation goes, uh, and how it's received across like every spectrum, right? From you've got everything from career tech ed, and accelerated career work that's already happening in K-12 to our Hope Career Grant and other high demand and quick start and the university system. There's so many pieces of it, including the entire WIOA system, that all have a connection to HDCI. I know when we were working on some HDCI stuff 2 years ago, I want to say. There we asked the Legislative Council at the General Assembly to look at how many times High Demand Career Initiative was pointed to in the larger Georgia Code that is basically a collection of all of our laws, and it was somewhere in the 30s. I want to say it was 32 or 33 times. There's a piece of legislation that got introduced and passed and added Georgia Code that pointed to high demand career, and this list that will be coming out from the state workforce board soon. So I think it's important to both watch it, but then also to take a little bit of a step back to realize that like it's a slow roll. It's not super fast or super sweeping all at once. It takes place over time, similar to when it was first introduced, with over 10 years ago now. So that there's a general implementation that each agency, each department, and each school, et cetera, has to go through as they adjust to that. I will say it's been a work of really good teamwork on how that's put together. It was not done in isolation or not done behind closed doors. There were so many groups and so many agencies and so many smart people involved in uh, how that high demand career initiative needs to be sketched out. For me, having been at this a really long time, um, I say that as it's probably not as long as some of the folks on this call, but it feels that way this morning. Uh, it's encouraging to see something that's been on the books and has been helpful for so long that people are seeing the value and importance of it, and then trying to build off of that and make it even something bigger than I think what we originally thought when it was first put into play. So very excited about that. I do think that on the economic development side, it's going to give a lot of clarity in the future for where, how, what, when all of these things can be aligned, whether that's on the education side, economic development incentives, just where in general our talent opportunities lies, both for everybody from small to large businesses that are thinking about, how do I fit into the supply chain of all of these other things? How do I think about expanding my business? Where are my opportunities for growth around the state? Like all of those questions, I think it just gives us a little better roadmap into where Georgia's headed economically when we think about job growth and job training and how our schools and education and workforce systems play into that and respond. So it's exciting, slightly scary maybe, and that's legitimate because anything new is always a little scary. But it's also super, super exciting just the fact that we will have that information and have guidance from the state on where the data is telling us all these opportunities lie.
I couldn't agree more. There have been a variety of kind of lists that were all considered high demand have been floating around, which has been very confusing. I think if you're a state agency, if you're a workforce provider, if you're a business community, so to have that, and I would totally agree, there's been so much collaboration around so many state agencies, not around just building this list, but thinking how do we really wrap everything else around it. I know we had Dr. Wall too here over the summer, kind of talking about some of how they're going to make some adjustments with CTAE programs. So more to come, I think, on how this looks. But Cosby, too, and turn it over for you. Any thoughts, obviously, from a regional perspective and thinking about those regional lists too? How are y'all kind of thinking about really utilizing this and building off of it?
I will say there is hardly anything to add to what Tim said. He covered it absolutely perfectly. I will say on the regional side and the businesses that I've talked to, the thing that oftentimes we're looking for in the smaller areas of the state is just additional transparency on how we plug in. We have on in the southeastern region, I cover the regional office for the chamber out of Brunswick and Glenn County area. You know, when I'm having conversations with Gulfstream, our small area between us and Savannah, we've come together and know that we can have a growth in aviation jobs, that we can have a growth in the aviation sector. How that growth in the aviation sector plays into kind of what the high demand career list is, how does it plug in, and how do we plug into the resources that could be effective not only for our educational institutions but for our larger job creators in the area is a question we continue to ask, and a question that we continue to work on gathering more transparency out of that space. The other one, obviously, is the big one, Hyundai, which I think everyone has seen that growth. I don't know if you've driven down 16 or made your way down, but the plant is absolutely huge. It is insane, a sight to behold. But it's also ringing true every time I drive by it that we're going to have to fill that building with bodies very soon. And, you know, how do we do that, and how do we ensure that the kids in Southeast or throughout the entire state really know about that opportunity and can funnel into that opportunity the same way very much that Governor Deal did when he brought Caterpillar to Georgia. So we're looking forward to tapping in. We are thankful for all of the work that's been done, and even more thankful that there were business partners, institutional partners, a lot of different partners, as Tim said, at the table to really get this thing moving down the road.
Yeah, and super exciting too to see what Anna Chapin and her team are doing with Rise in that Savannah region to kind of prep for a lot of that. But again, encourage everyone to make a couple of extra trips down 16 and all the way down to Brunswick.
I'm
That
doing anything to get them down there. Like, come
you
see the
know,
plant and then keep on coming.
well, and that's what actually I think at the Hyundai facility they're going to plan to have like a visitor center. So as
Yeah.
you're thinking about field trips and things like that, please, and retreats for y'all's folks, they really want to have like an open perspective so that people can understand really what it looks like. Again, I think Tim, y'all probably hear this all from your members too, but misconceptions of what manufacturing looks like. Well, before we wrap, anything Cosby, Tim, just any final words? Obviously, a lot of new things for session, but a lot of exciting things to look forward to, which is always nice going into session of being excited about some things to look forward to.
Yeah, I'll jump in first and let Tim close us out. Just some real quick leadership notes from our team that trying to coalesce everything that we've been through. You know, a big shout out to Daniela and her foundation team, also Nancy and our team at the government affairs side. We've attended a lot of study committees, gone to a lot of meetings, and from that, there's seemed to be some notes that are coming out of each of the head of our three legs of our stool. And the three legs are obviously the governor's office, the lieutenant governor's office, and then the speaker's office. It seems that Governor Kemp, to Tim's point, is really focused on some kind of state relief package for Hurricane Helene, with both budgetary and legislative components. I think the legislative components will be maybe some work around GEMA and how the response and what the response should be during catastrophic times. And so we are, as a coastal community, as somebody who was hit by Helene and power out for a week or so. We are looking forward to what that package looks like, and really thankful for GMA's quick response, because they were out there right with the linemen on Georgia Power, ensuring that we kind of got back up and back moving. So thankful there'll be some work done around that. Obviously, tort reform, strengthening of the state's educational programs and workforce is something we've heard. Enhance investments that bring jobs to Georgia, specifically in rural areas, and reinforce public safeties in communities and classrooms seems to be things that the governor continues to be focused on. The LG, from everything we've heard, has been focused on supporting Georgia's educators, business, and the businesses who employ them, as well as parents who are entering the workforce. Out of the Senate Study Committee on the Access to Affordable Childcare, some of the recommendations that we've heard is an increase to the tax credit for child and dependent care expenses to 40% of taxable income from 30%. Also, a creation of a Georgia Child Tax Credit of $250 per child under the age of 7. We've seen a couple of that. We think the lieutenant governor and the Senate probably will start to stand up some of those foundational principles that we hear coming out of that study committee. And then Speaker Burns has done a lot of have had a lot of conversations around two issues. The first one being healthcare. He's kind of opened himself up to bringing in, I think, some opinions on how we ensure that the Pathways program is successful, how we ensure that we continue to grow that tool that Governor Kemp has given us in our toolbox, but also how do we ensure that with a new administration coming into the White House, that we find a way to have some Georgia style waiver that allows us to repatriate Georgia's healthcare dollars back into our state. But he and his wife have also been extremely focused on literacy. We plan to probably see some piece of legislation around childhood literacy, and I'm sure that we will be supportive as he continues to work through that.
Thanks, Cosby. Tim?
Yeah, similar, the childcare efforts around tax credits and overall funding, we're definitely very excited about. Just the fact that there's a balance between, the parental side as well as the employer side, and realizing the dynamics that play out there. So excited to see what proposals that look like. Very curious what the governor's bills will look like around education and workforce, um, just because they carry a lot of weight, and often they're a collection of a lot of uh, really good fixes, or a lot of really good initiatives that lead up to a good package. So I'm curious to see what that will come around. And for the 2-year session, definitely on the post-secondary success, and how it plays into everything from high demand career initiative to more of our targeted industry that we're trying to support. I think that that's always exciting to see how those things align. And then what is going to fit into all that, both on the like K-12 CTE side, all the way through post-secondary and those certificates and credentials.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, Cosby, appreciate y'all sharing so much good information about what we can expect. Again, a lot to be excited about on the workforce side, which is not always the case. So that is great news, and we're really excited to have a great session. And we're just going to be really optimistic. Everything's going to go extremely well, exactly how we want it to. So again, if you're not a member of Max, please consider it. We'd love to have you join. There's a lot of exclusive benefits here, and then Joy Wilkins' information is at the bottom to answer any questions about membership. Um, Here's a QR code to make it a little bit easier for you. And again, a special thanks to all of our anchor investors. We're really excited to end the year on a high note, and hope y'all have a great December, very happy holidays, and look forward to giving y'all more great programming in January. But Cosby, Tim, again, thank you so much. Obviously, y'all really get to get running in January. And so we're just excited and grateful for everything y'all do to keep workforce development top of mind for the Georgia General Assembly and leadership. So thanks again, and hope everyone has a great Friday.
Thanks, Daniela.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
guys. Thanks, Tim.